I want to make some sound dampening panels to go on the ceiling right about here. And they're going to be just some fabric stretched over a frame like this. And the corners for this will be joined with bridle joints. And I've already cut the bridle part using my quick set tenon jig just by making multiple cuts. So next I need to cut the tenons to go into that. I need to make cuts outside of this range by the thickness of the saw blade. And I know the saw blade is about 100th thou thick. That's one turn on here. So I just need to move each stop to the outside by one turn. So those pieces join in the ends like this. I got to join the middle pieces like so, and I'll just cut some slot mortises right here. Now I need to cut tenons to fit in there, and I put a piece of scrap on here of the right thickness, so I'll just center that. I'll set the dial indicator to 0 where that center is on the blade. Now I need to go 125 thou in either direction from that, plus half the width of the blade, which is 100 thou, so half a turn on here. And I'll set the stop to that. And let's go back to the center. And same thing in the other direction, 125 plus 50. Set the stop. That's good. A small clamp on the bridle joint really helps to lock it together while the glue dries. For inside layers, I could use all kinds of fabric scraps, like stretching a t-shirt across it too. And I figured for this panel I'd also experiment with using fiberglass insulation. I'm just using half the thickness of an R12 bat. I figured that should be quite enough. A better test for these panels is to test them outside where I don't get as much reflected noise. And first I tested a t-shirt, which cut the sound down by quite a bit, then a sweatshirt, which cut it down even more. Then the panel is just 3 layers of fabric on the inside. And then the panel with the fiberglass in it. and then standing in front of it. So I got 4 of these panels made, and I cleared out a path here for my scaffold. So next I'll put them up here, but first let's test the echo. Oops, then I realized I hauled it up there upside down. There's too much stuff in the way for where it goes, so I have to get the panel ready and then haul it into place. I had been playing around with the software to make time lapses using my tablet computer, so I set that up while I installed the other 3 panels. And I figure this is not the sort of video that's going to get a whole lot of views, so I might as well spend a little bit of time talking instead of making the video run really fast because, well, usually videos that are fast-paced tend to do a little bit better. I think the important thing for sound panels is not so much that they absorb 100% of the sound, but that they cover a large part of the surface that they're mounted to. If you have a panel that, say, covers 25% of the surface and it absorbs 100% of the sound, that is still not as good as a panel that covers 50% of the surface and only absorbs half the sound. I didn't use the motorized part of the scaffold because I had to go up and down the scaffold all the time anyways, and I didn't want to get the extension cord. Plus, in terms of moving the scaffold around, I'd much rather be below it while I'm doing that, so I can avoid bumping into all the machines. I had been dreading putting these panels up there, but fortunately they're still narrow enough that I can get both sides of them with the scaffold. So it worked out better than I thought it would. And hopefully they won't come crashing down on me because they are actually attached to the ceiling with pocket holes. And they're offset from the ceiling so that the sound has to go through, then bounce off, and then come through again. If they're right on the ceiling, I think they would be less effective. And I still clear the lights and the ceiling fan. Okay, testing the sound again. So analyzing the footage from the camera, it doesn't make a noticeable difference, although standing there it seemed to make a difference in terms of echoes that I heard. Certainly I think they're more effective than the pieces of canvas that I hung off of the ceiling, and those made a huge difference in terms of sound levels. And I took another time lapse of moving all the stuff back in place, wedging that scaffold back in the corner where I actually kind of use it as a shelf and a small mezzanine, and had to jack it up a little bit just to get that dolly out from under the wheel. And then moving the workbench back in place, which I had propped up on 2 dollies. Bandsaw was easier because it's on wheels on its own. And I just used a couple of levers to get it off of those dollies, the same way I actually got it onto those dollies. That made the workbench really easy to move. And then moving a few other things back in place, and that's it.